The morning I found the letter in my mailbox, I had no idea it would change everything. My home, my neighborhood, my sense of safety, none of it would ever be the same. The Oakwood Heights Homeowners Association had always been strict, but fair, or so I thought. That illusion shattered the moment I tore open the envelope and read the bolded words, "Violation, unapproved lawn ornaments. Fine, $500. I knew it was a mistake. My yard was pristine, perfectly within regulation. But soon, I discovered the fine was no mistake at all. It was just the beginning of a web of fraud, blackmail, and corruption so deep it would bring the entire HOA crashing down and take its power-hungry president with it. I gripped the violation letter, my fingers tightening around the crisp paper. This had to be a clerical error. I had never placed a single ornament in my yard. Even the flowers I planted were carefully chosen from the HOA's approved list. My neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, shuffled over, clutching a similar envelope. Her face was pale, her frail hands shaking. "They're saying my wind chimes are unauthorized," she whispered. "But I took them down months ago when Victoria first complained." Victoria Blackwood, the newly elected HOA president. She'd won by only 2 votes, right after the previous president resigned under mysterious circumstances. Ever since she had been patrolling the neighborhood like a warden, her white Mercedes SUV creeping down the streets, her ever-present iPad in hand. "Let's get to the bottom of this," I said, anger bubbling inside me. Mrs. Thompson hesitated, fear flickering in her eyes. "They said if I challenge it, I might get more violations." I exhaled sharply. "Well, I'm not afraid of them." I stormed into the HOA office, pushing through the glass doors. Victoria sat behind her desk, cool and composed, her expensive designer glasses perched on the bridge of her nose. "There must be a mistake," I said, slapping my violation notice onto her desk. She didn't even blink. "Oh, I assure you, there's no mistake." She slid a photograph across the desk. It showed my lawn, with a garden gnome sitting right in the middle. I stared. "That's not mine." Victoria's smirk widened. "Are you suggesting our documentation is incorrect?" "Yes," I said through gritted teeth. "Because it is." She sighed dramatically. "Challenging the HOA can lead to additional complications. Just ask the Patels in Unit 156. They tried to fight their violations, too. Now they're facing daily fines and possible foreclosure." A chill ran down my spine. She was threatening me. As I left, I noticed something odd. Jerry Morton, Victoria's right-hand man, crouching behind some bushes across the street, his camera raised. He was photographing another house. Then, to my horror, he reached into his bag and placed something in the yard, a garden gnome. That's when I knew. This wasn't a mistake. It was a scam. Determined to find answers, I started combing through my old HOA documents. That's when I noticed something strange. The routing number on the payment slip for my violation didn't match the HOA's official account from last year's statement. It was a different account, a private one. This wasn't just about a few fake fines. This was a fraud on a massive scale. I reached out to my neighbor Linda Chin, a retired forensic accountant. She agreed to help, and within hours, we were buried in spreadsheets, tracing the payment records. Every fine paid through Victoria's new convenient online portal had been funneled into an account belonging to Community Standards LLC, a shell company registered just weeks before Victoria took office. And that was just the tip of the iceberg. The next morning, Victoria cornered me at my mailbox, her perfect smile masking the steel beneath. "Let's talk about your situation," she murmured. "I have some interesting photos here." She handed me a stack of images. They showed my house from various angles, each photo time-stamped. In some, trash bags sat on my curb days before pickup. On another, graffiti covered my garage door, graffiti that had clearly been added digitally. "These violations could add up to thousands in fines," she purred. "But I'm sure we can work something out if you're reasonable." A shakedown. Plain and simple. But as I examined the photos, I noticed something Victoria hadn't expected. In one picture, my window reflected an empty lawn. No trash bags, no graffiti. The metadata on the digital prints included editing timestamps. She'd doctored the evidence. I played along. "I'll need time to think about this." Her smile tightened. "You have until Friday." As she walked away, a slip of paper fell from her folder. I picked it up. It was a list of names. And next to each one, payment schedules, fines, and financial notes. They were targeting the most vulnerable residents, elderly neighbors, single parents, struggling families. People who couldn't fight back. That's when I made a decision. Victoria and Jerry thought they had everyone in this neighborhood under their thumb. They were wrong. Detective Martinez's call lingered in my mind as I met with Linda and Carol that evening. If Victoria and Jerry weren't working alone, how deep did this go? "The FBI thinks there are more people involved," Martinez had said. "We found HOA fraud patterns in 3 other states that match Victoria's scheme." My stomach churned. "You think there's an entire network?" "Not just a network," she confirmed. "A syndicate." Linda exhaled sharply. "So Victoria wasn't even the mastermind?" "She might have been a key player," I said. "But if she was reporting to someone else." Carol's face darkened. That means whoever is really in charge isn't done yet. We spent the next few hours combing through Carol's stolen files. Sure enough, buried among Victoria's emails were messages from an unknown sender using a generic alias, CS. Director. Who is this? I muttered. Carol hesitated. Look at the timestamps. They were sent at the same time Victoria was giving orders. She was taking instructions, Linda realized. Not giving them. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Victoria and Jerry had been puppets in something much larger. The real architect of this scheme was still out there. And now, they knew we were looking for them. The realization that Victoria and Jerry were just pawns in a larger game sent a fresh wave of determination through me. If the real mastermind was still out there, we had to act fast. Detective Martinez worked with the FBI to trace the alias CS. Director. It wasn't long before they linked the identity to Charles Sanderson, a former corporate executive who had built an empire by manipulating HOA regulations. He wasn't just running a scheme in our town, he had orchestrated similar frauds in over a dozen communities nationwide. The evidence we had gathered against Victoria and Jerry gave us a strong foundation, but to bring Sanderson down, we needed more. Carol, ever the brave one, agreed to reach out to Sanderson under the guise of taking over Victoria's role. She arranged a video call, and we set up a hidden surveillance team to monitor it. Sanderson appeared on the screen, a composed man in his late 50s, wearing a crisp suit and a calculating expression. I assume Victoria didn't have the stomach for it, he mused. Unfortunate, but not unexpected. Carol played along. She made mistakes, she said carefully. People got too suspicious. Sanderson chuckled. That's always the problem with these small-town operations. The trick is keeping people scared but compliant. He continued, unwittingly revealing details about his offshore accounts and how he used HOA loopholes to legally siphon money. The FBI had everything they needed. Moments later, agents stormed into his office, arresting him mid-call. With Sanderson in custody, the entire HOA fraud syndicate unraveled. Investigations stretched across multiple states, revealing millions in stolen funds. Homeowners who had been wronged finally had a chance at restitution. In our community, the changes were profound. Linda, officially elected as HOA president, led a full overhaul of the association's policies. Transparency became the new standard, and community meetings turned into genuine discussions instead of fear-driven spectacles. Carol, now hailed as a hero, started a national advocacy group to protect homeowners from predatory HOAs. Detective Martinez received a commendation for her role in taking down one of the largest real estate fraud rings in the country. As for me, I finally felt a sense of peace as I watched our neighborhood heal. Mrs. Thompson's wind chimes were back up, children played in the streets without fear of ridiculous fines, and people no longer whispered in fear when an HOA notice arrived. One evening, as I stood in my front yard, Linda walked over with a smile. You know, she said, this all started with one fake violation notice. I glanced at the framed letter hanging inside my house, the same letter that had kicked off everything. It's proof that standing up for what's right matters, I said, and that even the most corrupt systems can fall. Linda nodded. The HOA was meant to protect us, not prey on us. Now, it finally will. For the first time in a long time, I believed her. Months later, our town made headlines, not for scandal, but for resilience. With Sanderson's empire dismantled, other communities followed suit, demanding better HOA oversight. Carol's advocacy group worked alongside lawmakers to introduce new regulations that made fraud much harder to pull off. As for Oakwood Heights, it thrived. The once feared HOA now served the people instead of exploiting them. The new board members, all elected by the residents, ensured fair treatment for all. And me? I still have that first violation notice framed on my wall. Not as a reminder of the past, but as a promise that no one in our neighborhood will ever be a victim again. Because in the end, justice prevailed.